Hey guys, how is it going? So, this is it. Here it is, the final section of both of these books. Now, just a little forewarning, I'm actually not going to wrap up the Nibelheim incident in this one, for a couple of reasons. First off, most importantly, I kind of just wanted this last part to really focus on the reason I started this video series. I wanted it to be all about them so I could give a nice little wrap up and then finish this project. And for another reason that I'll divulge a little bit more at the end of this video. So apart from that, apologies if you were expecting that. It is coming, just not in this video. This long project is finally coming to an end. So I'm not going to waste my time, I'm just going to jump right into the finale. Starting off one last time with Gallagher's work. So, Gallagher starts off this chapter with, of course, the scene where Barrett jumps in and declares that President Shinra is dead. Long live President Shinra. I know it's in-game, but I always thought referring to him as the leader of Shinra Inc. is just kind of odd here. I mean, they all know who Shinra is. I suppose it's meant to be like pointing out that, yes, the main antagonist, the main arch-enemy of Avalanche has come to an end. But it reads a bit weird, I don't know. I mean, like, if Mark Zuckerberg died, you would know who I was talking about. The Facebook guy / reptilian overlord continuing to take our freedom and spy on us. Sorry, I slipped into Alex Jones there for a second. Finale means I still have cringy jokes, you see? That's what I do for you guys. So why change of tradition here in the last episode? Let's go ahead and get a quote from the first page of this chapter. He's dead, stammered Barrett, his voice distant. The leader of Shinra Inc. is dead. Cloud stumbled forward, summoned to the desk at the heart of the great hall by an invisible force. Unable to take his eyes from the unmoving figure of the president, he made no attempt to stop Tifa as she brushed past him, and began cautiously towards the center of the vast room. Slowly encircling the polished marble face of the workspace, she loomed over his swollen body in a wary but assured manner, his face pressed against the desk. It was not the array of reports scattered across the ground at his feet, nor the pool of blood forming at the base of his spine where the sword wound had been so fatal that had drawn Tifa. Her troubled eyes passed over the curving blade as it rose from his back, analyzing its shape. Stretching almost 6 feet in length, the katana was as elegant in design as it was powerful, with a slim handle bound in black leather and decorated in gold studs. I know this sword, she gasped, retreating with fear. It's the Masamune, confirmed Cloud, his worst nightmare becoming reality. It belongs to Sephiroth. Sephiroth is alive? Squeaked Tifa, holding a hand to her trembling lips. Looks like it, Cloud said, breathing heavily, unable to take his stare from the weapon. Only he can use that sword. So, this is gonna sound a bit weird. It's not wrong, it's just, I don't know, for some reason the phrase take his stare reads weird. It actually sounded okay when I did the reading there, but when I was reading it, like, just silently, it kind of reads weird. I was thinking, like, stop staring or take his eyes off would sound a little bit better there, at least to read it. When you say it aloud, I thought it was weird, but when I actually said it aloud, I was like, okay, that makes more sense. So, ignore that little piece of criticism there, because, I don't know. The rule of thumb that Gallagher himself taught me is, if it makes you go, huh, it could probably be better. But, anyways, it's fine. It's not an error. And for what it's worth, that was the only piece of constructive criticism I had for the entire chapter. So, the rest of this is pure gold. So they snag Palmer as he attempts to flee, and spills everything. I mean, not everything. The President Shinra has that covered, but in his scared ramblings, he reveals that Sephiroth is after the Promised Land, and he won't let Shinra mess it up, and Barrett, of course, mistakes this as the actions of a hero. Cloud corrects him. No, Barrett, He isn't the good guy. He killed somebody in cold blood who deserved it. Not like us, who blew up a whole bunch of Shinra buildings and killed hundreds. Jeez. Would it be a proper finale if I didn't bust Avalanche's chops one last time? More compilation references follow as Rufus Shinra arrives in a helicopter. Barrett explains how he caused Avalanche some trouble previously and has since been on a secret assignment. Nobody's ever seen him bleed or cry, they say. Well, naturally they haven't been to Disc 2 yet. So time for another quote here. This is from page 208 and 209. Getting these quotes out early, huh? The sky was becoming slightly less overcast as Cloud stormed out onto the stone balcony, but the chilly winter air still penetrated his thin polo neck. The streets of the distressed city could be seen for miles over the low wall that led to the helipad, separated by the illuminated intersecting highways and railway lines. Few transport vehicles were in motion at this hour, many of Midgar's inhabitants still mourning the loss of Sector 7. Looking ahead, Cloud saw Palmer had escaped to the rear of the helicopter, peeking timidly out from his seat as the party approached the vice president. Rufus Shinra was a man in his mid-20s, but his dark eyes bore wisdom beyond his age. His hair was golden in color, seeming less synthetic than his father's had, and was combed to one side. He was slim in stature, his appearance broadened by the jacket he wore over his white suit, but was less than 6 feet in height. Casually slotting the shotgun he carried into its holster on his belt, he stared without intimidation as the 5 lined up before him, crossing his arms impatiently over his chest. "And who are you?" he chuckled derisively, his voice loud over the din of the helicopter blades. "I'm formerly a soldier," Cloud answered sternly. "Really?" Rufus offered a mock salute. "What rank?" "First." "How very interesting," Rufus nodded, rolling his eyes. "And what about the rest of you?" "We're from Avalanche," growled Barrett. "Avalanche?" snorted Rufus. "You mean you're that insignificant group that named yourselves after the rebel faction? Despite his eventual madness, you have quite a nerve comparing yourselves to the intellectual brilliance of Fujito. How pathetic." "Just who the hell do you think you are?" bellowed Barrett. "Rufus Shinra," he replied with a sly smile, brushing the hair from his face. "The president of Shinra Inc." "You're only the president because of what Sephiroth did to your old man," snarled Barrett. "True," Rufus shrugged without remorse. So along with getting yet another compilation reference in there, we get a brilliant, low-key sociopathic twinge to the character. He's a billionaire kid, or dare I say, a gillionaire. Anyway, the point is, he's entitled, he's spoiled, but he's also been raised by a genuinely hate-filled man who's expected the best of him and treated him like crap. I'll take this time to plug Father and Son by Licorice All Source and Cameo Amalthea once more, as well as Case of Shinra. So, Cloud stops Barrett from shooting Rufus, something which I didn't even understand in-game. But, hey, maybe this is one of those why didn't Frodo kill Gollum moments. And hey, if it weren't for Rufus and Scarlet, they would have never made it into the Northern Crater, or out of the crater the first time for that matter, so there's that. Life lesson, kids. Murder is bad, okay? Anyway, the two exchange quips. Gallagher continues to pour on the smugness of this character. It's dripping off of the page. It's some really good writing, and his characterization continues to be on point. I also particularly enjoyed the small action sequence as Rufus tries to shoot a guy who literally brought a sword to a gunfight. The Cloud, of course, uses the massive blade to block the bullets. Nice touch. Cliché a bit, but I don't really care. That's engaging action right there, and it will always draw me in. Again, the description of the small paragraph is golden, but lest we go too quote-heavy in the final episode, I'll leave it out. Cutting over to Aerith, Barrett, and Red, Gallagher avoids the elevator fight scene entirely, which frankly makes a lot of sense, because that would have just pushed my willing suspension of disbelief a little bit too far. It's hard enough to justify it in the video game. He shows them on the ground floor, literally facing off against a battalion of Shinra soldiers outside the main building. Red and Aerith both basically say, "Don't be a hero," and Barrett says, "Bitch, I might be." Fortunately, Tifa shows up before they can... Is that still a thing, kids? Is that meme still anything? I just realized how dated that reference was. Okay, fortunately, Tifa shows up before they can do anything stupid, and tells them to join Cloud and her upstairs in the car dealership. They're having a great deal right now. 0 gil down, 0% APR financing, and no monthly payments until ever. Smart Car's getting a little bit desperate. What follows over the next 5 pages is a glorious orgy of description. How's that for a line? It's unmarred by dialogue. Gallagher can write an action scene. Let me tell you, Cloud punches through the streets of Midgar on his Hardy Daytona, a name that sounds like the name of a Japanese manga artist would give to an American country singer. Let's have a quote. This is from page 215. Cloud brought the vehicle to a standstill at the height of the stairwell, facing the tall spread of windows at the building's northeast corner. For a brief moment, he thought of the city that lay beyond his reflection in the glass, a city that he had once called home. He turned as the truck pulled alongside him, hearing the collective shouts as soldiers and infantrymen smashed through the main entrance below. With a nod to Tifa, he slammed his foot down on the accelerator as the first of the rifles were fired. The Hardy Daytona lurched forward, speeding through the windows in a blinding haze, and crashed through them, launching the bike into the night. It landed hard on the tarmac of Highway 23, the twin exhausts on either side of its rear wheel crunching against the road as the suspension buckled on impact. Bullets hailed from the street beneath him as the soldiers reacted desperately to prevent their flight from Shinra Building, their weak shots recoiling against the underside of the motor tricycle as it propelled through the air. There came a heavy sound of distorting metal as the van's nose collided with the freeway, its smoking tires squealing as Tifa swerved to miss the concrete barrier. Regaining control of the pickup, she pressed down hard on the gas, grappling with steering as she passed the stationary Cloud and began to pick up pace. Tearing along the deserted stretch of road as it made its way from Sector 0, the group followed the highway east towards the city limits. On his right, Cloud could make out the innumerable skyscrapers of the ultra-modern Sector 3 downtown district, like metropolitan sentinels protecting Shinra Inc.'s dictatorship over the world's economy base. The high buildings shone bright against the dark clouded sky, illuminated by scaling beams of unique colors and shrouded in the midst of Mako fumes. And I know it's Mako, I messed it up one last time. Again, appropriate for a finale. He really stretches the scene out and gives it some weight, describing Cloud passing through multiple sectors and painting vivid pictures of the industrial backdrop through which our heroes ride to freedom. All this before he even introduces the pursuing Shinra bike troops. And when it does get to that point, the action turns on once more, Cloud cutting them down with the same satisfying punch that it had in the game. And speaking of that, our missing elevator boss encounter winds up chasing them on the highway as the Heligunners pursue them, focusing... Oh, wow, that was a sentence I said. Let's try that again. I don't even care anymore. You know that I make mistakes. The Heligunners pursued them, forcing Cloud to once again block their bullets with his blade. Not quite the 100 gunner, but it's a nice nod to it all the same. It was a good way to incorporate them based on what I would expect from his past chapters. It then comes down to a soldier v soldier, with Cloud recognizing the uniforms of the second classes. Also a tiny bit of foreshadowing here, I think, but I've beaten the foreshadowing point dead through the review of the series, so I'll leave it there. So, when they finally shake their pursuit, Cloud tells the group that, frankly, Shinra let them go. To what end, they're not certain, but it surely can't be good. It's hella ominous, though, and a nice touch. Always good to add that sense of doubt to a story about being pursued. And so the group all decide that they can't stay in Midgar, and each of them has their own reasons for wanting to go, on the journey. They elect Cloud their leader, against Barrett's grumbling, of course. Let's have one final quote to end us out here. This is the last the last paragraph of page 221. With a daze of thoughts shuffling through his mind, he acknowledged little of Barrett's grumblings as he led the party down the worn steps of the improvised structure. His legs felt heavy and weak, causing the tinny sound of scraping steel to resonate around them as he dragged his boots over the rungs. They came at last to the mounds of grainy soil of the construction site, swirls of dust dancing around them in a gentle breeze, and taking one final glance back at the sleepless city, the company began towards the dawn. Nice. Okay, moving on to The Mercenary. That was my first time finishing that book, and it was, it's got the emotional appeal. It does a good job. I've read The Mercenary twice now, and it still manages to hit, just in case you're wondering. But that was a nice touch, Gallagher. Well done. So, with The Mercenary, we're picking up near the end of chapter 29. Again, we have Barrett stating the obvious, and then Cloud mentioning that only Sephiroth can use the Masamune. I think Gilgamesh would beg to differ. When Palmer bursts out, William includes a cute little line that I like. There was no way to be sure if Palmer was telling the truth. Cloud didn't have the right materia for it. It's a cute nod to the sense materia, and just, again, it's a nice little touch. I like that. He interjects those little, like, microscopic bits of world building. All throughout the chapter, really, but really all through the book. So, Rufus shows up, and I'm actually going to have this be our first quote from Williams here. This is from page 260. Cloud hadn't. It was one of the reasons he wasn't celebrating Shinra's death. Rufus Shinra was the son of the late president, the acting vice president, and as of now the highest shareholder in the company. Everything was, effectively, his. Sung slid open the helicopter door from the inside. Rufus strode out before it was open, touching down before the helicopter. He was a lean, long-legged man with a sweep of orange hair. While the president seemed to lean and gesture over his stout body everywhere he went, Rufus's steps were trim and precise, as if everything were timed. He had his father's hardened eyes. Otherwise, Cloud would have never guessed the relation. Following Rufus out of the helicopter was a huge black feline, waist-high at least, and with a whip-like tentacle slithering out behind its head. A guardhound, the color of midnight. Palmer shrieked something to Rufus. Cloud couldn't hear it over the propeller. Rufus's double-breasted white coat flapped at its calves. When the wind drew it aside, Cloud saw a shotgun hanging from Rufus's waist. Rufus nodded at Palmer, and Sung helped the executive into the helicopter. There comes with this an interesting little moment. Cloud being aware of Rufus's existence might accidentally be a pretty good compilation tie-in. And I know it's been Gallagher's thing up to this point to have the compilation tie-ins, but hey, Williams, if that wasn't intentional, I liked it, and it definitely works. When Rufus asks them who they all are, Williams also has Cloud hesitate for just a moment, before eventually deciding to be honest about his identity, somewhat. This is a moment that I like because Okay, so I'm of two minds. Let me rephrase this. I wrote it weird, but I'm gonna rephrase it. I like it, but I don't think it went far enough. Here's the thing. He goes from maybe I should lie to fuck it, I'll tell the truth, with like a sentence missing in the middle explaining why he did that. I just feel like it's a good character moment. It's the way you would normally think, but like give us that one or two extra lines to go what Cloud is thinking. To be fair, it's implied as the chapter ends that Cloud is trying to make himself the biggest threat to draw Rufus's attention away from Eris. This whole scene actually plays out a lot better. Instead of the guys just leaving, there is a moment of team unity where Tifa uses fire to create a barrier for their escape, leaving Cloud and Rufus on the other side. Moses would be proud. Chapter 30 opens up with the whole situation coming together on the other side. Aerith wants to wait for Cloud, of course, but Tifa explains that once Rufus learns who she is, she'll be in extreme peril, and getting her out is first priority. But Williams goes into further detail about this, and when Aerith realizes that Sung, who was with Rufus, saw her, she wonders why he didn't draw attention to that fact. She knows who she is. It's a good bit of foreshadowing to what their relationship is going to be like later. And then this happens. This is from page 264. 100 gunners, Aerith recognized. The mech suits... How does she know that? Okay. The mech suits stretched their arms forward, 4 palms facing Aerith and her party. The crimson plating whirred and moved, fractured. The fingers pulled away. The hands morphed spectacularly into the wide barrels of gun arms. "What?" Barrett shouted. In a long sweeping motion, the 100 gunners fired. The bullets tore through the glass of both cars. Aerith covered her face and dropped to her knees. Her arms were cut by shattering glass. An agonizing wind pulled Aerith in all directions. Her ears popped. Barrett shouted and the beast howled. Something scratched her back. It seared. But something else happened as well. Aerith could barely feel it through the pain, but reality warped for a moment. Someone was casting a spell on her. The feeling passed. She brought her head out from her arms. Only the floors remained of the elevators. The shards of the glass walls were mostly blown away by the torrential wind below the city's roof of smog. Even the 100 gunners had to regain their footing. The entire combat scene that follows is suitably intense, and shows how Williams chose to work in the somewhat impractical fight into the book. It does bend reason just a little bit, but it's not as jarring. I mean, it is a fantasy, and again, there are noticeable differences in how Williams and Gallagher's portray the story, but also this building. There's some interesting character moments here. I really enjoy Williams' portrayal of, in particular, Red. I mean, again, he does things with his character that I like. He shows his sense of disorientation during the freefall with this line about the winds howling around him. He mentions that it smells like nothing. It's kind of an odd line out of context, but for a beast who gets most of his information from the scent, there's probably no better way to convey that same sense of confusion. It's a good touch. I like it. Aerith even has time to have a dry, cool action line. It's a bit of internal monologue when she says she really needs to get some offensive magic, as she's standing helplessly while Red and Barrett fight the 100 gunners. I kind of get the feeling that Williams forgot to equip Aerith with materia the first time he did this fight. Now, here's where the strings begin to fall apart with Cloud's plan. We rejoin Cloud for his fight scene with Rufus, and within seconds, Cloud is forced to tell the truth about Aerith and who they are, because Rufus has the army killing anybody who leaves the building. Cloud says, hey, don't kill Aerith, she's an ancient, and Rufus goes, nah, Sephiroth is an ancient and he's easier to track. This despite being missing for 5 years. So, with respect, I gotta say that whole element fell a little flat for me. Info was kind of rushed out here, and some of the pieces of the whole scheme just didn't really flow together that well. I mean, I get what Williams was going for. Panicked situation, desperate plot foiled by obvious errors made in haste. But I think it could have been tidied up just a bit, just like that previous sentence I read. Okay, so we get to the fight. Rufus name drops Dark Nation, and that panther, I like that. And between the prior fight and this one, we see both protect and shell magic. Some good last-minute world building. Then the chapter ends with Cloud oddly going, "Aw man, Heidegger is still alive." Heidegger, yeah. When he notices the army. It's kind of a funny, goofy sort of line, and it totally fits because this is the dude who said, "Come on, guys, let's mosey." I'm gonna pull this one last time. Seems fitting for the finale. Chapter 31 opens with one last random NPC who Williams writes an entire loving backstory for. The rando soldier is a member of the mess waiting to apprehend the gang. We learn about the soldiers who are once again beginning to have second thoughts about the company and defecting to follow Sephiroth, hinting at the reunion. And we get some lovely little lore bits. I love the nod to the underwater materia in particular. It's a great little scene, it's about 2 pages long, and, say it with me now, I highly recommend you read the entire scene. My final large block quote will be picking back up with the group because it ends with one of the coolest descriptions of enemy skill materia I have ever read. This is from page 274 and 275. The broken car finally scraped to a halt on the ground floor. Barrett moved ahead from the elevators without a sound, out through the front doors, where he disappeared from sight. A sound like rain clattered outside, the cocking of uncountable guns. The unseen Shinra forces wasted no time firing. A strobing symphony of light illuminated the lobby from the street. The glass doors shattered along with the tall, high-placed windows. Glass fountained out into the lobby and splashed onto the marble floor. Silver letters mounted above the entranceway crashed down. Mako energy for a brighter future. Got it right that time! Sorry. The last Cetra screamed. Barrett leapt back inside and behind a marble column. He was bleeding. The spell Red 13 had cast on them, a spell he called Big Guard, had finally ended. He cast it again. Red 13's race, the legends say, could all commune naturally with materia. He found he was no exception. The yellow stone glowed inside his hair clip. He drew out the magic from its intricate depths. The materia was a special stone, even among others. It could learn. That 3-line sentence is just awesome. That's just an amazing and unique and wonderfully describes how Williams writes his world, enriching it with his own imagination. I love it. So Tifa hotwires the truck, and he does call it a truck instead of a van. Regional differences are fun. We get one more hilarious line from Red 13. "I am about to die. How peculiar." Okay, funny side story here. This reminds me of how one time me, my sister, and my friend Josh were driving out in the country, and I took a turn a little bit too wide and going a little bit too fast. We made it out okay, obviously, but it did cause Josh to quip in a completely neutral tone, "Oh, so this is how I'm going to die." So the truck bolts out onto the street and the chaos ensues, with Barrett firing from the back. Cloud has his badass action movie moment and lands on the street. And that ends Chapter 31. Chapter 32 is Williams' finale and features the same high-octane action from everything up to this point. Little to note in the way of action here specifically, except Cloud's Hollywood-esque monologue. I do love how Eris comments aloud, "Aw man, Scarlet's still alive," as some of the weaponry shows up, particularly the motorball. This is a reference to Cloud's earlier lines, and it's just a cute little dopey running gag to have in the last few chapters. It's the kind of line that makes you go, wah, 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 in your head. It's just funny for funny's sake. Okay. Well, as for what happens next, I mean, you know how it ends. They beat up the motorball, they make their decision to journey together, and they climb down the makeshift rope to the base level. Now let's go ahead and see how Williams ends his book. And personally, I do have to say, and maybe this is just familiarity bias, but I do think his closing line, the single closing line, is a little bit better. It hits me a little bit harder for some reason. Gallagher's not bad at all. I really liked it. Like I said, really hits you in the heart. But I think this last line is very powerful. It has a sort of simplicity to it that really hits you. All right, everyone. Cloud stepped out into the desert. On our way. They moved northeast into the endless field of dull silt, away from the glass wall that kept the slums on the other side safe. They left Midgar behind. Wow, okay, so, with the exception of the placement of the 100-gunner battle, the actual events of these two work, pretty similarly. Both authors, I think, knew better than to tinker too much with the grand ending to this section. With Williams, we of course get one final side character moment to tie his recurring theme together, that taking a deeper look at the ordinary lives of the citizens, and with Gallagher's focus on making the finale as explosive and in-your-face as possible. This is probably due to the way these authors structure their chapters. Again, all this was one of Gallagher's chapters, and about 3.5 of Williams. So, grand conclusion here. Well, I would say this series has proven to me, and hopefully to you, the key strengths of each author, as well as reinforcing the idea I laid out in the first episode, that being that Gallagher's is the more complete and pure work, which better tells the story to a newcomer. But Williams is full of more unique individualism, which would play better to somebody who has already experienced the story and is looking for a fresh take. And again, sorry if this feels anticlimactic, but I'm not going to choose a favorite. I think both authors do a great job constructing a cohesive narrative with their own unique flair. Now, I decided that because this is the finale of the comparison series, as I said at the beginning, I don't want to do that little bit with the Nibelheim incident. I know it seems a bit weird now since I've already done most of it with this, but I'm going to use that as a jumping off point for a less intensive and significantly shorter series where I just read fanfiction and give a quick review. It won't be as monstrous as these. I'm talking like short 5-minute videos, although the first episode will be wrapping up the Nibelheim incident, so it might be a little bit longer. And it's just going to be something I can do where I can not spend 3 weeks in between episodes writing it, scripting it out. It's just, I read it, I give a quick summary. It should be much easier to produce. Not heavy block quotes, not comparing, all that stuff. And it's just something I want to do because I want to do a lot more reading. I'm writing a lot, but I don't get to read much. I used to have an entire fanfiction section as part of the Fan Friday, and I have stopped doing that. So this is what I'm going to be doing in place of that. And the question is, well, what are you going to read next? Well, obviously, I'll be moving on to Gallagher's second book, and I might even take a peek at Axelera Ray. Personally, I kind of want to see what that's all about. But that's going to be a back burner thing. That's going to be when I can find the time. My life schedule is a bit chaotic these days. I really want to branch out into finding short fanfiction pieces from the plethora of authors on fanfiction.net, and possibly AO3. I have an account there, but I don't go on there often, admittedly. I just want to, I want to have something I can do where I can read and give my thoughts. I like this, and I like being able to kind of give exposure to other writers through the limited platform that I have. I think I'm going to get to maybe one a month. Again, I don't want to overburden myself, but I like this idea. I love reading it. I've had a blast reading these 3 books at the same time, and reading these 2 in particular has just been, it's so much fun. So I really recommend, of course, that you guys pick these up and read them yourself. But for those of you who have stuck around this long, thank you. Yeah, there's going to be more of this in a shorter, easier to view format, and easier to make, too. And there's going to be another thing I'm doing. As far as other video content, I've always kind of wanted to do a series of just really short video essays about Final Fantasy in general. Small, common topics that just interest me. Again, something I can knock out in a night. Nothing quite as massive as this. Just stuff that I like doing for my sake. And definitely not as robust. That's the important. I keep on saying this because I want you to know that, despite the fact that I'm going to still produce some video content, my shift of priority is going straight back into editing. This is done. It's time to get back to work. Okay. well, this is it. Thank you all for watching this lengthy and detailed review of both works. Those of you who have stuck around for 12 episodes of this, thank you. You guys are champions. And one last thank you to my Patreon Knights. Matthew Caveat Zealot, MJ Gallagher, Robin Berg, and Robert Molt. He's a new one this time. Well, that's it, guys. I'll see you around.